Every time I go to
Morning, Natalie. All right, it's 9:30. I'll call the meeting to order. So this is standing committee of the whole for Tuesday, June 13th, 2023. 100% attendance at the beginning of the meeting with Councillor Jolly attending virtually. Everyone else in person. I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
You're not fast enough.
Councillor McKay, go ahead.
That fancy shirt. That the June 13th, 2023 agenda be adopted as presented.
For the vote. That passes unanimously, and now we will go on to no one registered to speak, is that correct? Okay, making sure. And then I need a motion to approve the minutes from our May 9th. Go ahead, Councillor Romanski.
That the standing committee of the whole minutes of May 9th, 2023 be adopted as presented.
Awesome. Call for the vote. That passes unanimously. All right, very first item on our agenda is the Environmental Advisory Committee recommendations on water conservation. Is Bill Marsh with us? Is he online?
I am here.
There he is. Hi, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing good. This will be a very productive day for me now because my federal connection to my servers is shut down. So I'm like,
Well, once again, thanks for doing all the volunteer work you do with the Environmental Advisory Committee and taking on the big job as chair. Do you have a bit of a presentation for us?
it's just text. Nothing, no PowerPoint. So,
That's all good. Why don't you get started?
okay. Good morning, Mayor Heron and Council. You know me, my name is Bill Marsh and I'm chair of the Environmental Advisory Committee. I'm here today to present the EAC's recommendation and the proposed amendments to the city's water conservation bylaw. The Environmental Advisory Committee had the opportunity to review the water conservation bylaw with city administration at our March and May meetings this year. The key amendments to this bylaw include the removal of low flow fixture provisions and definitions. This is supported by the availability of only low flow fixtures in retail locations and the lack of enforceability of these provisions through municipal enforcement services and building inspection services, making the section redundant. In addition, the numerical provisions are included in the National Plumbing Code and can be referenced there. Inclusion of water demand management measures and CAO authority to implement and the ability to enforce these measures to respond to notifications from the Regional Water Customers Group. The addition of definitions of CAO, city, and peace officer to align with other bylaws. Water use restrictions be expanded year-round to ensure adequate water resource management amid a changing climate. And finally, the last addition was fines and penalties updated from $25 to $100 to align with other bylaws. The Environmental Advisory Committee is recommending Council support the proposed amendments to the bylaw. And this concludes my presentation. And staff from Environment Utilities and I are available for questions from Council.
Awesome. Thank you. That was fast. Who do we have?
Yeah, I talk fast too.
Oh.
I know who to ask.
Got Megan, I believe on, yeah.
All right, so I already saw Councillor Killick's hand go up, so go ahead, Mike.
I don't have any questions. I apologize. I was just pointing out that I was also on the committee.
Okay.
We did the review.
Answer some questions.
Should support anything.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Thank you. I guess this question's for Bill and committee. I just want to clarify the idea of putting the restriction on year round, where that initiated.
I think where that stems from is with the changing climate, and it's just hard to define which months are going to be our dry months and just generally weather patterns. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So we don't have to constantly amend these bylaws, those timelines.
What's the current months?
April to October.
Yeah, sorry, I'm hearing
I thought
different
it was May to
answers.
September.
No,
May 1st to October 1st.
half split 50.
And so you're sort of saying that if you could need water in April, maybe even March or beyond October? Okay. Other questions?
Just,
Go ahead, Councilor McCarthy.
yeah, sorry. I mean, it just struck me there that, I mean, what does the residents do that make ice in the winter for their kids in the backyard between those hours? How would they be impacted by that?
They aren't. If you look, there's a, if it's basically for activities with kids, I think recreational play, it's
Okay.
fine. Like you can run a sprinkler for recreational play during the daytime. For example.
Oh, good answer, Bill. Thanks. I appreciate the clarification because I was just trying to think, what would I use water for in the winter? And it would be just to make ice in my backyard if I had.
But even during the day, you can take your hose with an attachment and water your flowers,
Yeah.
just like you would be flooding a hand. Yes.
Just the volume of water would be different.
We just don't want people forgetting that they have water running, right? Like you can with the sprinkler system.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Thanks for the clarification. I see that now in here.
Go ahead, Sean.
One other question I had, Bill, is that it was removed the definition of the attachment for the hose, like the nozzle for the hose, and yet it specifies nozzle later in the bylaw. So I'm not sure why that definition was removed.
Megan, do you know?
No, I'm not sure. I didn't realize that was removed as well. I'm not sure. Maybe is Dave here? I'm not sure if that was a mistake.
I'm here,
Yeah,
Megan.
you are right.
So-
It is actually used in the water use restrictions area. So
Yeah, I see that though. We use it in the exception section, so it is probably a mistake.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's removed in 3B and it's in 5A.
Yeah, that's a good catch. So I can just
Yep.
quickly work with Ledge to make the motion, update the motion so we can amend that.
To keep the definition in.
The definition.
And the other question I had is like for spring cleanup, a lot of people are having people come in and clean their windows, clean their house, during the April. I guess April is kind of prime time for that. So, what kind of restrictions would that put on people that are hiring out someone to do that at their property?
I think again, that's a controlled use of water. So it should be an exception already because it's a nozzle based application, right?
I don't know if they'd be called nozzle when it's pressure washer, but okay, that's it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Sheena.
Okay, thank you. So with the water demand management measures that's being added in, aren't we doing that now? Is this just formalizing what we're doing, or is there any changes from what we were doing before? I'm still looking at you, Bill, because you
No,
know the history.
I think, and I think it's probably best poised.
I'm not sure if Regan is on the line here, but yeah. Okay, there he is. Regan, do you want to take that?
So that piece we've added in just because we've actually it's the enforcement piece. So when we get, and I hope we never get into a demand management C, there's an enforcement component to that, and right now that's actually not supported by bylaw. So we may get into a situation where we need to enforce limitations or restrictions on outdoor water usage. And we need the ability to impose fines and penalties, and right now we don't have that. So with the update of this water conservation bylaw, we thought it was a good fit to include that in here. And then if we ever do get into a situation like that, we have the ability to enforce.
So we do have times though, like where water is low, and that's what you're talking about for the water demand management is when
Right.
we're going through a.
Right.
Right.
Yesterday we went into a water demand condition B At a condition C, that's B is voluntary. But when we get into a C, we're at a critical point in our reservoirs, and we're trying to maintain reservoir levels above our fire storage volumes, and at that point we would look to enforce with residents. So.
And everything in here, just to make clear, everything that you wrote in here is what we are currently doing, just not being enforced.
At a high level, yes. We just referred to the water demand measures at a high level here.
Right.
Because they do change. It's something that's evolved over time, and we don't want to come back and update the bylaw every time we need to do it. But what we've put in here is if we need to do enforcement of the water demand management measures, we have the ability now.
So just for the public who doesn't want to spend the time reading all of this to understand, if we were to go to level C, what kind of measures would we be expecting the public to experience?
Typically with the C, we're talking no outdoor water usage. So it's a ban on outdoor water usage.
So could they not even water their plants? Like you could hand water it, or we're talking nothing?
That's the situation that we're at, is we're not watering plants and we're not watering lawns. So it's a very critical drought situation that I hope I never have to experience.
Is there any indoor limitations, or is it just outdoor?
No, it's just outdoor. The enforcement is only outdoor. We're not going to go, we're obviously going to be requesting that residents, save water indoors as well, but the enforcement is just on the outdoor. So.
Okay. I'd rather keep up my shower on watering the book. Well, save your bucket from the shower. Bring it out there. Okay. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
I have another couple.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Again, a couple questions. Sorry, I should have had them all at once. Why was the fine rates from 25 to 100 if you're not enforcing any town?
It was just to align with some of our other bylaws that we have within the city. I mean, we are going out and seeing it actually happening. So if it did come to a point where we had to enforce it, we're giving verbal warnings at this point, but then it is in place when we're going to go out and actually have to have a fine.
So you would give a verbal warning prior to a fine?
That's typically what MES has been doing to date. Yeah.
Okay. And then what circumstance would have to happen that 11B would put forward on summary conviction of 10,000 or imprisonment? Like what would you have to do to get it to that stage?
I don't know, Mark.
It's language from the provincial offenses procedure. So it's like it's in all of our bylaws, all of our enforcement provisions. I don't think Aaron's on the line. I don't know how they approach it, but I can say
It would
surely that's not applicable.
It would be
To be very, and especially for this type of bylaw, but it's typical standard wording for enforcement provisions, so we wouldn't take it out. It's just, it'd be very egregious, but for this kind of a bylaw, I'm not sure what that actually means.
I mean, it's like, if I can basically, based on the use that I would be involved with, it's just consider the concept of progressive discipline, right? You come to a situation, it's egregious, as Councillor Broadhead said, it would probably be some resident or maybe a greenhouse or something like that, that basically continue to flaunt and are not follow any directions or not follow, just $100 fine each time is not very, very significant for some operations. So it just gives another tool in the toolbox, to use a tired term, for our enforcement people to look at in case we ever had to go that far. But it's pretty egregious, mismanagement or flaunting of the bylaw. I don't think we've ever taken anybody and done that at all for any number of different things, whether it's sanitary or,
That's good, I guess, but in fact, it is there, right?
Well, it has to be there under procedures by Act of Alberta. Has to be.
That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Jolly, you're good? Okay. See no more questions? Go ahead, Mike.
No, I'll just make the motion.
Okay, go ahead.
That the Standing Committee of the Whole recommended council that bylaw 10/2023 to amend the water conservation bylaw 22/2015 be passed.
Awesome. All right, any comments on that?
Yeah, I think the environmental team did a great job bringing this to the EAC on 2 occasions. We had good debate on some of the things and asked some of the questions that were asked here. So it was good to hear consistent answers, as it always is. And I think this will support how the climate is changing and bringing in the date that's a broader range makes it easier. Residents don't have to think, oh, does it start this day or end that day? It's across the board. And as we've seen in the last few days, our water reservoirs have come to very critical low levels. So hopefully the rules to enforce this, we never see, but you never know. We're getting, with climate change, we're getting awfully close. So the improvements in the bylaw and changes to it, I think are all positive and would be supported by the community.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The comment I had, again, thank you to the environmental committee, you know, great job. It's always a lot to go through all these bylaws because you're fine tuning everything. The one thing in the bylaw changes that I do have a bit of a problem with is like the city of St. Albert residents do a great job. I mean, water usage is down substantially than it has been in the past. I believe that for the best part, residents do take care and, worry about the environment and do follow the rules when they come up. But then we're raising fines and trying to find more ways of enforcing it. And I sort of feel like we're punishing good behavior, so to speak. And so I don't feel that I'm in favor of raising the fines. And I was happy to hear that it would be education on first offense, but it's not really written here. So I mean, it could be that one senior that didn't hear the notice at noon and was, watering it a couple hours later and gets $100 fine. So I just like the education factor and the fact that, to commend the community for people are really doing a great job in St. Albert. So that's my comments.
Good work, EAC. That's all I'll say. I appreciate the time that put into these things. Northern Alberta sometimes takes water for granted. It's a very expensive resource coming out of your tap, the amount of money that we invest into water treatment, into the pipes, as we can tell by the Sturgeon Reservoir project, and getting it to your house. And then after it's used and takes over with the sewage side of it. It's an expensive resource that we need to value. When you live in Southern Alberta, I think you get this a lot better and have a better understanding of water scarcity. So just because it doesn't seem to be a problem here doesn't mean it isn't. And as we're seeing with climate, it could be. So I think this is great. Anything to close?
Mayor, can I just add one thing? Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, thanks again to both administration and the Environmental Advisory Committee for this. When we look at the statistics showing that we're still, as of 2022, we were still 15 liters per capita shy of our target of 200 liters per day, and 2021 was way higher than that. So our water consumption is not where we've targeted it to be. So I'm glad to see that we are still trying to bring awareness to the need to conserve. That's all I have. Thank you.
Anything to close, Mike?
Yeah, just again, good work brings in many of the things into kind of current standard practice for our CAO for eventual enforcement. And we never get to that date, but I think generally residents are aware of the challenges with water, but it's good to have a clear bylaws that will help guide them and provide enforcement if and when we ever need it. So this is a good, well-written bylaw, and appreciate Councillor Vermansky's catch on the nozzle. So clearly some writing there that we probably all overlooked. So good catch. Get those amendments made. Have these changes to the bylaw approved.
All right, call for the vote. Unanimously.
Yeah, sorry, I was.
Thank you, Bill. We'll see you soon.
Hope you get your server fixed there so you can do some real work.
Yeah, 30,000 people are offline right now.
Really?
Must be CRA, I guess, eh?
No, this is national defense.
No, I know, but it's probably CRA messing with you.
Okay.
We feel much safer.
A Russian.
It's the Dean Schick Show.
It's a balloon.
Let's talk about the biggest project we've undertaken probably since I've been mayor out of Given, the St. Albert Trail. Oh,
Somebody's.
we all know who that is. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and members of the committee. Let me just share my screen here. We do have a presentation. Yep. So as noted, my name is Dean Schick. I'm the.
There you go. There you
Let's get on.
Just take-
I turn this way. I'm Dean Schick. I'm the manager of transportation with engineering services. I'm very happy to be here today to present to you results of our review with action on postpone motion 23050 and an update to charter N070, which is North St. Albert Trail Phase 3 funding. By the end of today's presentation, I hope to leave all of you with recognition as to why we're here talking about the subject, a little bit of background on the North St. Albert Trail project itself, and then details in regards to the review taken and results and administration recommendations for North St. Albert Trail to advance the next phase of construction. At the end of the presentation, we will have time for questions, but also if you have questions during the presentation, please don't hesitate to let me know and we can answer them right then and there. So today we're largely here because of, as a result of postpone motion 23050, which was approved by council during the 2023 budget deliberations and gave direction to administration to investigate opportunities for phasing of North St. Albert Trail, the next phase of improvements, as well as possible review of scope and any possible adjustments. The deliverable for today's from the motion is actually attached to your agenda packages as an updated project charter for N070, the North St. Albert Trail improvements. Again, as a bit of background and a reminder, the North St. Albert Trail program project itself was identified as a key priority from the 2018 Transportation Network Improvement Strategy. It was up there with Ray Gibbon Drive as top priority projects following a review of the entire network. It would identify prioritized projects that would best benefit for mitigation of congestion and possible network delay. Initially, the North St. Albert Trail project itself was identified as a 3-phase project, starting from just north of the Boudreaux Road intersection. As per the phases shown here, the first phase going north from the Boudreaux Road intersection took us to just north of Coal Mine Road. The second phase then extended from that boundary to just north of the Ever Drive North intersection and Jensen Lakes Boulevard intersection. And then the third phase extends from just north of Ever Drive North to the intersection of Fowler or Neil Ross Road and future Fowler Way intersection. And so the overall project anticipated delivery for urbanizing the corridor of St. Albert Trail. As you may know, it's a rural cross section of previous highway. And so as we urbanize it, we look to accommodate storm management systems, utilities, accommodate active pedestrians, accommodate active modes. And then there were additional considerations for intersection improvements and then additional travel lanes as well. Cost estimates for the original project for the full 3 phases were valued at $18.9 million, which were derived from conceptual improvements. So by that, what I mean is the network improvement strategy essentially took linear distance costs associated with adding a travel lane, standard intersection improvements and applied costs and came to the $18.9 million. That budget was approved along with a borrowing bylaw with a 35% contingency, which equated to a $26 million total for the project. Phase 1 began in 2019 following the budget approval and the borrowing bylaw approval. And so this was delivery of phase 1 only. It looked at as an entire segment. Essentially, the results of getting into the project itself started to look at more details as the project advanced. So examples of this would be the alignment of the roadway, necessary intersection improvements because traffic analysis was performed on the intersections themselves to say what requirements or what could be done at the intersection. And then also the design of storm management systems, utility infrastructure. All of these influences ultimately at the project level influence the scope and resulting costs associated with delivering phase one. Those were recognized to be higher than the anticipated conceptual costs just for phase one itself. But construction continued and advanced starting in 2020. As you may be aware, there was a little bit of delay with phase one. We're still in construction right now. However, as a status update, it's anticipated for completion in the next 2 months. So before the end of summer 2023, phase one will be completed. My word. Along with that, there was a little bit of takeaway and some lessons learned from working on phase one. So largely it was some adjustments were made with phase 2 and 3 to advance design for both the segments, compiling them both, giving the benefit of economy of scale to having professional services completed on both. We got cost savings on the design work, as well as a more holistic approach to the design for the full segments. And then also higher turnaround, quicker turnaround in terms of achieving cost estimate improvements for accuracy. So with the phase 2 and 3 work, there was continuation of the original kind of concepts and intent from phase 1. So as phase 2 and 3 advanced for detailed design in 2020, we did continue to realign the southbound travel lanes. We maintained the urbanization of the cross section, keeping that in line with phase 1 deliverables. And at the end of the phase 2 and 3 design completion, what we recognized was that cost estimates were higher than the original concept cost estimates for the full segment now, with both 2 and 3 added to phase 1. Project itself was for 2 and 3 well over the $18.9 million. However, administration recognized that phase 1 and 2 were above the $18.9 million, but within the approved borrowing bylaw, so under $26 million. Administration was then in front of council recommending that we increase the budget, but maintain the borrowing bylaw, which was approved for 2022, and construction started in 2022 for phase 2. At that time as well, then administration suggested coming back to council for budget consideration, creating a new updated charter with phase 3, phase 4 work for the future. Which put us in front of council with an updated charter. A little bit of clarity too, that initially administration had thought that phase 3 could be deferred largely to a short-term timeframe, so not an extended amount of time. But when the first charter was originally drafted, thought possibly a 3 to 5 year deferral could happen with phase 3. But one of the key influences was the fact that the city has a planned project for a Fire Hall 4 planned for location on the northwest corner of Neil Ross Road and Future Fowler Way. So recognizing the construction impacts and for possible service levels from the Fire Hall, we didn't want to delay that work. We can see the construction impact right now. If you drive down from phase 2 work, having the 2 lanes down to a single lane, it's quite impactful for congestion and whatnot. And recognizing that with the location of the fire hall and the services to respond to calls were largely going to be southbound, the recommendation from administration then and the updated charter represented a timeline for phase 3 to be delivered in 2023 and 2024. And hence then it went to council for budget, and the postponed motion was then brought forward and approved. So as we responded to the postponed motion, our key aspect was to really separate the project into terms of key considerations for its delivery. And the first order of business was to separate for priority to try and reduce the risk and mitigate any kind of service level impacts to the fire hall, which was expected for operation in 2025. So essentially this boiled down to separating the southbound lanes and the west side of the corridor from the northbound. That was how the priority was essentially separated, with the southbound being more critical and higher priority level of work. The next phase of work essentially looked to say what kind of scope of work could be delivered and what opportunities or scenarios existed and what the variances were between delivering the different scenarios. First scenario looked at was to try and maintain the existing alignment of the southbound lanes to minimize costs with reducing impact of constructing new travel lanes. The second scenario, just for clarity on the first phase, it does not realign the southbound lanes. However, it does deliver the full urbanization of the corridor, accommodates active modes, delivers on the full intent of the project, other than not realigning the southbound lanes. In the second phase of a scenario of work, we looked at critical work only. So this would be possible improvements that would deliver the additional travel lane, accommodate necessary intersection improvements, accommodate anything required by standards, for example, street lighting, or necessary utility work to accommodate storm management, not put the city at risk or liability with how the system would operate if it were constructed. This scenario removes, though, any supplemental work or let's say additional considerations. So more the aesthetic side, there's no landscaping considered, there's no anything above concrete or anything considered above and beyond what is intended to deliver on the main functional requirements that have that travel lane. To the point that even as an example in this scenario too, it does shift the roadway. It realigns the southbound lanes, but it doesn't perform the incidental work of removing the old road structure or anything aesthetic on that side of things. And the third phase performed for review was incorporating the full scope of work. So what would be best beneficial to deliver the full urbanization? It takes advantage as well of having a contractor and contract created for the work in terms of economy of scale, being that we do the full west side to perform tie-ins and prepare the intersections for future development. And again, delivers on the main focus and objectives of the overall corridor improvements themselves. For more detail and focused here in a little bit of a graphic, this is the first alternative. It's just a section, the south section of 3A. You can see the fuchsia on the south boundary here, where it ties into phase 2. There's a little delay there. So this is phase 2, the north boundary of phase 2. And then what would happen is that we would need to realign the roadway to get it back into the southbound alignment. And you can see the dark red is kind of transitioning to scope of work to where it's just standard mill and overlay. It's not a reconstruction of the roadway or anything of the sort, but it accommodates the active transportation with the trail, performs landscaping, incidental work for like street lighting and utility work would all be performed in this scenario as well. The cost estimate for this scenario comes in at approximately $9.45 million. It's the lowest cost of the 3 scenarios. It also, again, maintains the key objectives of adding capacity to the southbound St. Albert Trail, as well as the urbanization. However, it does risk the highest risk of investment for today's investments of improvements, and it maintains a rural cross section. And why I say that's a negative is because the wider the intersection, the more operational impacts it has. So as an example, accommodating a pedestrian to cross a wide rural cross section, it requires more time and thus can create a little more delay on the main corridor. Same thing in operational impacts with accommodating left turns and whatnot. So there's an operational impact when you don't urbanize quite to the extent that you could.
So Dean, so before, because I was reading them and I was trying to figure this out. So when you say highest investment risk, highest risk, how is it what investment protection are we missing? Is it because of the left turn base and that sort of thing? Is that what the investment risk?
No, so the investment risk is actually, that's a great segue, like we planned it. So it's actually in line with what we build today. If the corridor is delivered on what it currently is approved for in terms of LRT and a transit priority, the investment made today will be lost. So everything constructed in today's improvement will be lost to accommodate the future needs. Now, this is not an immediate risk. So this is not something that I want to suggest as an immediate risk. However, I provide this graphic as an example to show again, this is, as you can see, the realignment, and then the southbound lanes would get constructed, the added lane, everything accommodated. The concept on the left maintains the northbound, but it shows where the future potential LRT corridor would exist. And so the shift would occur, it would be required because the LRT is essentially plunked right square on where the existing southbound lanes are located today. So in the scenario, the variance as well between, if I can go back to the slide, the estimate of the $9.45 million of scenario 1 of the alternative route is approximately $1.94 million lower than the full scope of work, recommended work, and approximately $750,000 lower than the critical work only. So in terms of the investment of what is made today, the cost of $1.94 million is the cost of essentially putting all infrastructure that we build today out of the way of possible future need.
So you're telling me the difference between option A and C is basically $2 million.
Correct. In the second, oh, sorry.
I also don't know how we become waterway.
Yeah, it looks like.
That's
Side of the road.
if we go beyond the use of the water bylaw. I threw it in as a say, no. That's what, we just wanted your pure focus on here. And then this is the alternative too, that we go from vehicle movement to boat movement, but that's later on. That's phase 5.
So,
Varies.
so Dean, just not only the investment risk of later on having potentially to move the southbound lanes over to the east, make room for that LRT right away. We would be digging all that road up again, which would throw that money away. Plus, it would interfere with use of the fire hall. The fire hall risk would still be, would actually be worse potentially, because you've got a fire hall built there now, and now you're digging up the southbound road, correct?
Correct. And so that's assuming, I know, you know, that the site is permanent and the structure and whatnot is put in. Again, I don't want to suggest that it's an immediate risk. However, beyond, we're talking about a disruption beyond just even fire services to the general network, because by the time should LRT ever come to fruition, we're talking about a level of growth within the community and region that is going to be quite impactful to suggest that we're going to perform this work and remove lanes and realign Highway 2 or St. Albert Trail through the city.
Just, sorry, can I interrupt, Officer? Just on that, I just maybe want to point out, it doesn't have to be like LRT, like we envision it today, like rail trail, like what they're moving up in Edmonton. It could be rapid bus lane. It could be a different type of modality, because like you said, it's not immediate. We could be talking substantial years down the way. So I'm just making the point in case people think that it's like the modern version, our current version of LRT. It could be many different types of transportation modalities rather than just because you still have that option available, that it doesn't necessarily have to be the installation of rails, but it could be another way.
That's correct. And the reason why I use LRT as the example is because to date, that's the currently approved plan. So not only a jurisdictional for the city of St. Albert is St. Albert Trail identified as an approved LRT and corridor and a transit priority. It's also identified in the Edmonton Region Growth Plan. So there's that, and it's big to your point, Councilor McKay. It is just what is known to date, but it could really come to any fruition. The one thing as well, what I just identifying this graphic is that the 6 lanes for both northbound and southbound are maintained. So what's invested in today is completely maintained. There's no future reduction in terms of trying to accommodate whatever future considerations may be required. There's no need to take away passenger vehicle lanes to accommodate anything for growth or necessary changes on the west side of the corridor.
I'm sorry, just follow up on that. So I mean, right now, it's the same question. Sorry, Jermaine. So just right now, the plan is, and it's further later on, probably in your presentation. So excuse me if I've skipped ahead. I don't have the segue skills of Councillor Hughes. The issue would be in the sense that there is going to be potentially a park and ride up around that same area. So even if Fire Hall 4 isn't a permanent structure, I mean, you still have the park and ride. Potentially, you'll have maybe other emergency services up in that area with a new police facility or something like that in time. So, I mean, it's just not all dependent on just a fire hall. Like there's and the TOD is still in the growth plan with the MRB, right? So
that is correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly in that northwest corner of Neil Ross today and future Fowlerway is where that TOD site is protected.
Yeah. All right. Sorry.
Thanks, Dean. A few questions. I'm not 100% clear, from your map. Say that LRT doesn't go there, like, the world changes, something's directed a different way. Would the road as it's designed in plan number 1, is that like the most, I guess, visually compatible road? Because right now it seems to like veer off all over the place. A lot of people comment to me that the lanes don't look correctly traveled. You've got all this concrete on the side and such. So would that make that whole road appear like that? And if, you know, and then you just have this wasted space sitting there in case?
So the realignment is largely, it is creating that transition. So in and around the area where it transitions to shift, because based on the LRT plan, the LRT is actually enters the city at the south end and travels on the east side of the St. Albert Trail corridor and transitions just to the north of the Boudreaux Road. So where essentially the North St. Albert Trail project began is where the shift of the roadway to try and protect for the placement of infrastructure started. And so the LRT will transition to the west. And that's why in and around that Villeneuve Road intersection is where there's a slight S curve to get back onto the old alignment of Boudreaux, of where St. Albert Trail ties in with Boudreaux and whatnot.
Right. Okay, and I mean, I wasn't around for the full history of that, but I find it odd that you'd have a rapid transit crossing St. Albert Trail and blocking traffic as it does everywhere in Edmonton, right, for extended lengths of time. So is there a possibility that wouldn't cross, you know, say that even happens, there's a good possibility that it may not cross St. Albert Trail at some point in time?
Yes, absolutely. So it's not a positive, it is not, it is planned to cross St. Albert Trail. However, one of the benefits and one of, recognized when we started the work with the North St. Albert Trail improvements, and one of the rationale for shifting the roadway to the east was actually to accommodate, we have the opportunity, a conceptual design that the LRT could go under the St. Albert Trail. So it wouldn't be an at-grade cross. And that was one of the benefits of shifting the roadway to the point that we have as well, to maintain that as an option going forward.
And we do get, you know, numerous complaints from the public that, you know, there's pads of cement that are for who knows when and whatever. So I mean, I think, and because, you know, the road has become so much over budget, would it be your advice that we'd, you know, just kind of tune it back on things that are not needed for a long time in the future?
I appreciate that question. And I think, you know, again, there's going to be different opinions and different perceptions. And so in regards to this, absolutely. I mean, our basis here is to try and deliver what is required to maintain the objective of improving St. Albert Trail. In terms of the concrete pads, I can share with you, there are considerations in terms of how some of these are being connected, because you have sidewalk connections as well as the trail. And so where you would maybe put a standard pedestrian ramp or landing zone, if you will, for pedestrians, it's widened because, you know, little pieces of sod or landscaping won't be beneficial or necessarily or grow in that area, won't be sufficient or sustainable. Another component as well is, as you try and maintain intersections along St. Albert Trail, one thing that we struggle with operationally is where can we safely pull off and provide equipment, access to the signal cabinets and whatnot. If you notice where some of these concrete pads are, they're actually in proximity to where the signal cabinets are located. That's on purpose, so we can get guys off the road, equipment off the road, and not potentially cause issue. Give a safer work environment and give opportunity to not have to close a lane or cause too much disruption.
But if I might, I think from an administrative perspective, and Dean sort of weigh in on this, the most cost effective to achieve the end state, the most cost effective way is to do it all at once. And do the entire project, minimizes the disruption from a duration perspective over years. And you get economies of scale. In this instance, because we've been asked to scale it, we can make a recommendation on which scaling piece is better. But the administrative recommendation, just to be clear, would be do it all, if it was still the desire was still council.
Okay, and then the other question I had, it says here pedestrian accommodation west side corridor. What is that? Is that another pad or?
That's the trail, pedestrian trail. Yeah, the multi-use trail.
Trails mentioned separately, so I was confused by that. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And so phase two, the second alternative was critical scope only. And so again, just at a quick level here, this is just critical work only. So get rid of all the incidental work, supplemental work, such as landscaping, not required to accommodate and additional travel lane or necessary intersection improvements. I want to be very clear to say, though, that this is not a cost savings. This is a cost deferral. At some point in time, the city would likely have to come in and perform this work. As an example, with a realignment of the roadway, I can't imagine our stakeholders or residents are going to appreciate the old road structure still remaining there or no landscaping and whatnot being delivered. So the impact here, it's the second lowest of the scenarios, estimated at $10.2 million. And so what it does is identify that variance between the higher scenario, which is scenario 3 we'll discuss, is approximately $1.19 million for that added full scope of delivery. And this scenario is about $750,000 more than the first scenario of maintaining the southbound reline. And the last phase is as a base mark, just the full scope project delivery. So urbanizing full southbound lanes, accommodating pedestrians, street lighting, utility work, everything. Again, what this does as well is we perform the improvements, the intersection improvements right to the west boundary of St. Albert Trail. What this does is it puts infrastructure in place that will allow for development to tie in. This helps in regards to economy of scale because we have contractors on site and you're performing asphalt work or concrete work, so you get that benefit as well in terms of costs. But it also expedites then when development occurs. They have direct connectivity and accommodation for users where there have been times where there may be slight delay, where as an example, a roadway may be constructed, but there's no pedestrian link or anything like that, or landscape is not completed. So it's kind of left unfinished until future projects are completed. This eliminates and removes that completely.
Another question is the time that you'll be working on the projects. Would it be constant under all the variables, or is one going to take, you're under construction for 2 years kind of thing, or?
No, so I have to admit, we haven't investigated necessarily the detailed schedule, but likely the shortest time frame would be scenario 2 because it's portion of scope compared to the other 2 scenarios. Likely phase scenario 1 would be the second in terms of shortest duration because you're only mill and overlay. There's not a reconstruction. The utility work and the reconstruction of the roadway ultimately influences the greater time. I don't know if I would be confident to say that scenario 1 may be a single year construction and scenario 3 would be 2. Scenario 3 is anticipated to be 2 years of construction if advanced. So the full scope of work is anticipated to take 2 years. But the phase with the realignment of the roadway, there's probably a higher probability of getting it done in a single year, but I'd still say probably for contingency, 2 years of construction. And so with the full phase 3A, the total cost for this scenario was $11.4 million. Again, this scenario for scope of work is $1.94 million higher than the first scenario that does not realign the roadway, and approximately $1.19 million higher than scenario 2, which realigns the roadway but does not perform any scope outside of critical work. This table quickly summarizes the individual scenarios, just for recognition as well that the northbound phase was only a single scenario because it does not account for any need to realign the roadway. There's no real benefit in terms of delaying work or anything or looking at alternatives. So it was just separated as a single scenario. Whereas the individual cost estimates for the 3 scenarios of 3A, the priority levels, are identified. And then that second row identifies what the total cost of that scenario 3A is combined with sum to 3B. So again, these costs are reflective of construction costs only. So these don't add in, construction management, but there is a contingency in these costs of 10%. They are at a detailed design level. So we have that 10% contingency. And essentially, one key takeaway from all of this is that identification that northbound, the non-priority work, secondary priority work, is less than 30% of the overall total budget costs. So depending on the scenario, on the lower end, the 3A scenario, it represents about 23% of the total project costs. And on the higher end, it represents about 27%. So you're looking at on average a quarter of the costs linked to the non-priority northbound work. However, in recognition of this, we're recommending that we add to Bill's comment that 3A and 3B are advanced together, just in recognition of economy of scale and benefit for costs to do the full holistic scope, being that we don't really gain and I don't want to, downplay $3.4 million of funding, but in the overall project delivery, if we defer the work, it's likely you're paying for mobilization and higher costs of construction to come back and do that outside of a dedicated combined contract. Total requested value of funding is $16.2 million. That's reflective of the construction costs, which are the 14.795 for the recommended scenario with 3B. One thing I wanted to do too, because if I was sitting in your chairs, I would say, why would administration not have come with this right from the get-go? And so where were the cost savings? Because this is significant in regards to approximately $8 million of reduction from the previous charter that was in front of council during 2023 budget deliberation. Cost reductions largely come from savings on the northbound side. So it's reflective of savings, to which what we did was, when the project was initially developed, we obviously look at a project and say, well, this is the optimal, the best way to deliver the project. And so that's what was recommended. We had those costs associated with the postponed motion. We brought back, looked at more detail in regards to the actual current condition levels of the northbound travel lanes, because there was a heavy area of large volume aligned to reconstruction on the northbound side as well. But we investigated that, and we feel on an engineering side that there's no heavy risk or liability to perform a mill and overlay and not perform reconstruction on the northbound direction. And we believe that we can maintain it at a suitable level of service and not have any heavy risk or liability associated with northbound travel lanes by performing that preservation treatment.
But it's not urbanized, and sorry to interrupt and jump in on that. The northbound, was it urbanized with the development of the Cameron development there, or it's all rural, right? So you're still ditches and.
That's correct. So, and that was another area of cost savings, to which, again, optimally, we have standards, minimum standards that we follow in terms of drainage. And so there's areas to which, when you urbanize and you accommodate storm management, you now, in a rural cross section, you're just getting surface water to the side of the road into the ditch. In this case, as you urbanize, you have to deal with drainage, try and get them to your storm management systems, your catch basins, whatnot. And so we looked at that, and that was another opportunity for some cost savings, to which, again, it's not heavy risk. We wouldn't be recommending this if there was any substantial heavy risk associated with it. But we lowered the standards in terms of the grading. It will maintain drainage, but it's not going to be it's not the optimal design.
So where does that drain then? So I mean, you've got a ditch on the northbound portion, so the east side, and then it's going to be draining into the new development that Landrex is putting in, or does it capture there? Where does it get captured?
So it actually diverts. There's a point in phase 3 where it transitions and goes to the north, and then the south, and ties into the existing system. In any scenario, though, what we see is, as we urbanize it, you're getting away from the ditch, and you're going to a storm management system. So the pipes are coming in and it's tying into our storm management.
So you're at no risk of overloading that.
No, that's correct.
Portion of the urbanized system that's picks up that everything.
That's correct.
Okay, good. And then maybe you're going to get to this, and I'm jumping ahead. So if it segues, congratulations for me. So on the value requested, you've got in your backgrounder that 65% of the project costs are OSL applicable, right?
That's correct. So, yep. Coming up here,
Why don't we just let him finish the presentation?
Yeah, I will. Yeah, sorry.
I'll address that right away here. I just want to summarize administration's recommendations and link them back to the information that has been.
Thanks.
So, because again, that scope is less than 30%, around 25% for the northbound, we're recommending that both 3A and 3B advance as a single project. We are suggesting that at the cost of the $1.94 million to protect for the future, the roadway is realigned. And then also that we advance the work to fully urbanize the scope associated with scenario 3, and then get the work completed and move on in future for the next phases. So this, if approved and if once constructed, will have St. Albert Trail completely urbanized, connected, and prepared for development and needs right from south entrance into the city, right to Fowler Neil Ross Road. And so the next scenarios for improvements would be advanced later as development occurs, and would be in updated charters. And so This is these recommendations are what's reflective in your agenda package for both the ENG 070 charter update as well as the recommendations in the scope. Now, one thing that we've heard as well is that, and a fair comment is that we sometimes don't fairly show you what you're getting for your dollar. And so this concept, if I might, will show what is essentially being suggested. So as we fly over, this is the phase 2 work. And it transitions then, it has 6 lanes of travel, pedestrian accommodation, multi-use trail on both sides of the roadway, intersection treatments with dual left turns. And then as we go through, there's a commercial access and it'll tie in to the existing southbound lanes north of Neil Ross or future Fowler Way. And so there's improvements as well that will be taken. You may be aware from this concept that you can see existing today. It was planned for the future to be a dual left turn on Neil Ross as an example. It's a median that's really just not filled in or anything. So that will be removed and then we can have a dual left to better service and address needs there. And you can see on the north side or the right of the screen where it transitions back to the Highway 2 southbound alignment. In regards to offsite levy costs, I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention because we recognize that St. Albert Trail is both, it involves scope of work, both offsite levy applicable and not. So offsite levy work, scope and costs are associated with anything accommodating growth demands and new services kind of aligned with the urbanization. So in terms of full costs, anything associated with utilities, street lighting, the landscaping, those are all 100% offsite leviable. In terms of the project for St. Albert Trail itself, we recognize as an example that developers did not choose to realign the roadway. They did not approve St. Albert Trail as an LRT corridor for consideration. So that's a city cost. But the construction of a brand new travel lane, as an example, that cost is associated with offsite levies. So there's a portion of civil work or road work that is attributable to offsite levy costs. Right now, the cost estimate of the overall project is 65% offsite leviable, 35% would be tax impactful. This represents approximately 0. Now, recognizing, of course, that is, it can be changing in regards to the cost and whatnot, but it's in and around 0.4% tax impact from the 16.2 recommended value. So my apologies for a long-winded presentation, but the recommendations from the administration is that project charter ENG 070 is approved at the value of $16.22 million. Just want to recognize as well that administration is recommending this be approved outside of the typical budget process, largely because the charter itself has gone through prioritization. So, and nothing has changed for priority level for delivery. It's in the top priorities for the city to deliver on. And also that there's recognition that if we have approval, we can perform tendering in the latter part of 2023 for early acknowledgement and award in 2024. There's anticipated cost benefits in having a tender out where you're not quite in such a conflict or competition with other projects. And it's good for construction companies, obviously, that have a buy-in because this project is a 2-year anticipated project. So we anticipate very strong costs if we're able to do this. And so with this, then, if approved, then advanced administration would then have direction to develop a borrowing bylaw based for phase 3 only. So the phase 4 future considerations, St. Albert Trail would not be considered with the borrowing bylaw. And with that, any questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So when we put this out to tender, is there a consideration of the company's ability to provide the work in a timely fashion? And the reason why I say this is nothing irritates people more than to run into lane closures and there's nobody there. And so like we've been at this now for a number of years in St. Albert North and now Ray-Gibbon Drive's under construction and get all sorts of complaints about, nobody there. And I recognize that perhaps there's labor shortages, but I mean, Is it a component of your tendering process to say, hey, this is a 2-year project. We expect you to get it done. And oh, by the way, we want to see you working.
Is there penalties for not coming?
Yes, yeah, so absolutely. And I mean, so what we have in our tendering process, we do have site occupancy days, which charges the contractor for each day that they're on site performing the work. So whether they're on site or not is irrelevant. Once they start the project, time starts for those site off days. The other consideration is in terms of just the overall methodology and whatnot, what's proposed. There's levels of detail in terms of the considerations for the contractors that have been performing work on site and whatnot, and we've addressed as best possible. But there are, through our contracts, absolutely, there's penalties in terms of, potential delay in terms of the site off. We are looking at ways on the engineering side to try and strengthen those. Typically, one option would be, typically if you have penalties, you need to have some bonus incentive. And so that's one thing that the city hasn't applied to contracts in the past is any kind of bonus incentive or anything like that. So we've relied heavily on the site off days. But as it turns out, it's not a big stick. So we're looking for ways to improve on that and what we can do, because there's, despite levels of detail in whether sometimes it's, subs of the contractor and whatnot. So it's hard to, pinpoint exactly, but that is a key component for consideration.
Well, I know we all know this, but this is a public forum and now we stated that we're actually working to try to address those issues. So thank you for that.
Good question.
Thank you.
Your question, Mike, and then Sheena.
Yeah, Dean, I know in the construction world that when there's penalties for late performance, contractors build that into their price. So you even though you say we're going to fine them $1,000 a day, they've already got that. They build that into their price, knowing that that's potential, just like they know delays or bad weather in the fall, rain or whatever. They build that into their price. So the stick that we think we have for penalties, actually contractors build that in. The carrot, yes, of earlier completion is a much stronger incentive to manage their site and finish early so that they can get on to the next one and get more work, more money. So just again, to be clear, I think there's a bit of a fallacy that penalties are the answer when in fact they come back to bite you. Penalties get paid one way or the other. So I just wanted to confirm that is what happens in the construction world. The other question then, and so when this was prioritized, was it prioritized against road projects or against all projects?
So just for clarity, the North St. Albert Trail as a road project was prioritized within the network improvement strategy. So against other road projects to see benefit of reduction of congestion and delay. But in terms of the charter, it was prioritized based against other municipal projects for funding.
So were the other municipal projects, because I've always trying to look at this through the lens of saying that council has made a big priority for servicing our industrial lands as a top priority. And if we have to borrow money, that would, a big priority. That helps shift the tax base from residential to business. Again, if we have serviceable land and we can grow. So we're really struggling to say, is this the right borrowing bylaw to come forward at this time when a short while ago, Diane gave us a great overview of all of the challenges that we're going to face in borrowing. And I'm trying to rationalize how the prioritization projects or prioritization process worked in light of all of those other challenges.
Maybe I could offer initial comment if I could, Bishop. I think it's important. So I will let the experts speak to the prioritization that's happened in years past, but it's important not to divorce this from the fire hall 4 response piece. So an option is absolutely to defer St. Albert Trail North, but then you accept reduced ability of our first responders to respond from fire hall 4. Everett can talk about what that nearly like to the point where there may be a cogent discussion about whether that's the right place for fire hall 4 in the time we're talking about. So that is an absolute component that drives certainly the southbound lane, I think, calculus on this. So I'll park that for now, perhaps. And Diane, then if you want to jump in and the experts.
I'll just go back to a little bit about what we talked about in the debt strategy presentation as well, is that, absolutely Lakeview is, one of the number one priorities of council. But what we did show is that, we talked about those big 3 projects that were all highest priority pieces. So approving this is not going to prevent debt capacity available for Lakeview. There is enough room within our debt capacity to cover sort of those 3 major projects.
And the Northeast.
This one being a very high priority one, as well as Lakeview. But it's not going to put you in a position where when Lakeview comes in front of you, we have no debt capacity left to push that forward, because that is a super high priority for the city.
And same kind of follow-on question around the sewer line 3, I think it is, what, they can't build houses in Erin Ridge North on the Landrex land until there's more sewer capacity. I think it's like actually totally maxed out. So is that a higher priority to get that work done before we start work on the trail?
I'll actually defer that to Donnie.
So to add to the comments that Diane just provided, that Northeast servicing is part of the top 3 that we presented back when we presented the debt strategy. So the North St. Albert Trail Phase 3, the Northeast servicing, and Lakeview, those are the ones that we considered as top 3 that will max out our debt capacity at some point.
Okay, so with fire hall number 4, if we were to defer St. Albert Trail North, and we still went ahead with fire hall number 4, it would then give us real data of response times being met or not being met, or can't remember what they are, 10 minutes or 90% of the time. But there are other ways to mitigate if we did traffic or construction on the southbound lanes, right? There's all kinds of ways to mitigate travel times. Fire trucks face construction all the time, and they do route planning, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if Everett.
Yeah, he's here.
Yeah, could speak to that.
So good morning, council, and thank you, Councillor Killick, for the question. You are correct. Route planning for our emergency response vehicles does take place daily. Every time we get a road closure notification or there's an event in the community, our crews, platoon chiefs more specifically, go through the process of identifying, call it a speed route around the event, and to help mitigate or reduce the time impact that creates. With respect to location, the Fire Hall 4 was put in that, or was identified for the north area of town to help address our reduced response times to that area. We were in excess of 10 minutes, and as per council direction, we're to be on scene in 9 minutes, 90% of the time. With regards to the build out or the location of Station 4, specifically access to St. Albert Trail and future Fowler Way, access is key for us, of course. The less twists and turns, stops, points of acceleration, that helps reduce the amount of time that it takes a fire apparatus to build up momentum, if you will, and to provide that timely response. As we build out the north area or the north side of the city of St. Albert, obviously there will be a lot of growth, a lot of construction. We're aware of that. The location of Station 4 and the building of it now puts us in a really good position to be ahead of the curve, if you will, with regards to response times. So if we do have barriers and obstructions in the way, I'd be confident in saying today that we would be still very capable of making our response times. Of course, as we build out, as we extend further to the north, to the east, and to the northwest, obviously that's that data you refer to, Councillor Killick, where we'd have to be very careful in understanding what the construction impacts are, meaning to the fire service, to the response to our community, and what changes, if any, would have to be made to how we build the area. I hope I answered your question.
No, that's perfect, Kevin, and you're taking on Councilman Scott's expertise for a segue here, so I'll just segue over to the build out and vehicle capacity. So it's been noted that in Rockland's application, when they came and spoke to us to move their location, potentially, it's still an open point. But Melcor had provided a letter saying that they would not be developing to the north for and needing to take over the Rockland site for 8 years. They were willing to give Rockland an 8-year window of operation. So the development that Melcor has is moving west along Villeneuve Road, which is serviced by Fire Hall number 3. And but nonetheless, they have set an 8-year window before things start to get heavily developed in the north. Landrex likewise, I believe, has said that their development would take 6 to 8 years in relation to the comments around the sanitary sewer line. So we've got this window from the developers giving us 6 to 8 years before lots of houses get built there for fire response time. And I think fire standards are increased with less flammable materials as well. So there's a bunch of things happening that I just wonder if we've got a window of time that would allow us to step back and defer this funding, finish the work that we've got for underway right now, and defer that work. So I don't know if somebody here is Donnie or maybe Adrian around timeline of development, but I have those 2 data points from previous presentations on build out schedule.
So maybe I could just offer an initial comment and then Everett, Donnie can weigh in. But I think, Donnie, you could talk about the potential to defer it. If we're talking about anything less than sort of 20 years, we're still ultimately going to stack that debt on top of one another in terms of those payments, right? So a 3 to 5 year, and Diane, please correct me, but a 3 to 5 year deferment, an 8-year deferment really doesn't do a whole lot from a debt ceiling perspective, just in terms of the calculus on that front. I would say that, I'll defer to Everett to speak about, the realities of building codes and all these other things as it relates to the response times writ large. But I think that the period of deferment is ultimately probably where the discussion needs to be. And a few years, you'll end up paying more in a few years, likely based on trends. And I don't think your debt ceiling really has any significant impact.
I get I totally love the whole term of laddering or phasing of debt, but by deferring it, it does defer a potential tax increase. So the timing of when the tax increase comes in and residents start to pay for it, that is deferred. And that's a big piece. I understand they're going to compound eventually, but it's phasing when residents would have to pay for it is my point. So Donnie, any comments on information that you've heard for developer schedule and timelines?
I would just like to add, based on the development agreements that we have seen to date and the conversation that we have, I mean, 6 to 8 timeframe is pretty fair in terms of how the development will progress in that area. But given the history of how we have come to date, in terms of at least lessons learned from how we have not addressed the North St. Albert Trail advancement in the past, we see I would say, concurrence of all this construction in the last 3 to 5 years, right? So what we are trying to avoid here by advancing it is to avoid that be ahead of the development in terms of St. Albert Trail construction. That's the advantage that we get in advancing it, and as well as supporting the fire hall needs. One other conversation that we have heard from developers is that if we are not ready with the fire emergency services, one thing that we may enter into is allowing them to build in that extra exterior facade to prevent buildings from the delays that occur from the fire services. That is expensive, is what we heard from the developers. They would rather have a fire hall built than put that extra cost into each built out building exterior facade to prevent the fire occurrence, right? So that's also we are hearing from the developers. So it's from all angles when we look at it's we are better off to advance the construction. Also, we have to consider if you defer it by any means, the construction cost is not guaranteed to stay with what we have estimated to date, which will also have an impact on tax dollars down the road. So I would stick with the theme of whatever presented. Staying ahead of the curve is ideal for us to be in.
Okay. And my last question just at this stage is offsite levies. Was a short while ago that I think end of March that this project was shown as 100% offsite leviable. But I mean, that was a contentious issue at the time with the developers. And now we're seeing a 75 or 65-35. And I don't know how maybe an explanation or a little bit more in depth of understanding of what changed since end of March to now would have been when we were reviewing offsite levies previously.
Maybe I can pass that on to Dean for details, but as the design estimates progressed, we realized that there are certain components of the scope that we have. It's not offset leviable. It's not growth related. For example, when we did the phase 1 and 2, there was a certain portion of it that is RMR related, a mill and inlay of an existing laneway, which is not growth related or offset leviable, which is a city cost. So as the scope gets developed and the estimate comes better, we then look at it and say, okay, what is the split now? So right now it's sitting at 65-35. And I think as the offsite levy program got developed a few years ago, North St. Albert Trail, the whole corridor was considered growth related, and as a default, we considered it to be 100%. But when the project progressed in scope and estimates, that's when we realized that, okay, the split is not exactly 100% completely on OSL. So there is a component that we need to take on as a city as well. So this has been discussed in detail on every project, and not just North St. Albert Trail, in our offset levy committee as well. So the developers get to say, the portions that they get to see reflected in the offset levy, so the offset levy is not high on them as well. So Dean, if you want to add anything in particular to the phase 3A, please do so.
Yeah, sorry. So just for clarity, I mean, I lean very heavily on Tanya, who is the guru on everything offsite leviable. But essentially, just to Donnie's point, is that when the charter and the project was first developed, it was put, as with many other projects, it was put as 100% offsite leviable. So Tanya inputted the model at 100%. And what happened is there's I don't know the details, but there's difficulty and impacts if you change that percentage. So instead of changing the percentage in the model, we changed the values to reflect, to Donnie's point, what we started to do is reduce the scope. So the model shows 100%, but it's not truly 100% of the project costs. Right? So it's the value in the model has been, the costs associated in the model are all offsite leviable costs. And so thus 100% of those costs are attributable to offsite levies. But we're not putting in the value of the RMR work into the offsite levy work, into the offsite levy model, is my understanding.
So,
I hope I'm not
yeah.
talking up opinions, but
That's fair. So if you have a $300 million or $30 million project, you would only put $20 million, which is attributable to the developers as the offsite levy amount.
and I think that's where the confusion has been, because the model suggests 100%, but that's not the cost.
It's 100% of what
That's
the
right.
developer.
That's correct.
paid, but there's another 80% or 20% that taxpayers would pay.
Correct.
Yeah. That's good clarification because I think I've been kind of confused on that for a while. So I appreciate that. Although it was $20 million was 100% of what was offsite leviable to in that document. So now we're saying this is 16 million. So there's been some.
And 10 point
Something is leviable.
2 million, don't quote me on the point, but it's 10 million is attributable to offsite levy costs. And about 5.7 million is non-offsite leviable, which equates to the 0.4%.
Yeah,
tax.
yeah. So back in March, it was 20 million.
24 million, I think.
24 million.
Was the estimate.
Yeah. So now we're saying it's significantly less.
Because of all of the reduction.
But then it'll be reflected next March.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Down for next March.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the time when Tanya was performing her update, we didn't have all these different scenarios and the opportunity of scope adjustments and whatnot finalized. So we maintain that value, but the update will occur, and that's the benefit of doing an annual update, and those costs will reflect.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks for all of the clarifications. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna call a 10-minute break, just because I think it's been an hour and a half and it's a bio break. And then I'll go to Shelley first. So let's get back here shortly after 11. Okay.
Yeah.
We unmuted? Natalie, you can hear us? Okay, awesome. All right, let's finish this off. I had Councillor Hughes and then Councillor McKay.
Okay, he's a good question, but I'm not going to use it. A couple questions. So you said that the costs for the management weren't included. So where are we getting the money for the management cost?
So that represents the total of the $16.2 million. Construction in full value with 3A and B was the 14.75, and 10% construction management. Yeah.
So are we not putting any contingency costs at all in the borrowing bylaw then? Or are we that confident that we don't need them?
I think I better let Marta or finance speak on that, because I thought it was a kind of a typical process to add a contingency value to borrowing bylaws.
Yeah, I'll let Ann speak to that.
So I guess before you, so Van, is the borrowing bylaw for 16 or is the borrowing bylaw for 18, for example, then?
Yeah, well, the borrowing bylaw would be for the full amount, so it'd be at the 18. I think it was 20 mentioned in the AR, right?
The 16 plus a contingency.
25%.
25%.
Okay, so we're borrowing 20, but we're planning to spend 16.
Yes.
And we're pretty confident about that number for the 16, because I know you said plus or minus 10, but this little guy's gone over a bit over budget. And I know we're doing it differently this time, but are we really, we're pretty solid that we're going to be able to do this?
We have with the design completed.
Yeah.
There's that big difference between that original estimate, I think that 18.9 originally, which was conceptual. There was no design. It was like a linear charge compared to we have design now. And so we know what we want to build. We have up-to-date construction costs that we are associating with it.
Okay, so we're as confident as we can be at this moment, I guess I would say. Okay, that's awesome. The other question I had about was so basically I got the three routes. We have the one we're not changing it, but we are landscaping it. We have option B, we are moving the line up, but we're not making it look pretty. And we have the third option, which is we're making it look pretty and we're moving it. That's basically the three choices. Okay, so for the third choice, for the difference of the 1.1 million for landscaping, is the intention to do it to the same standard of landscaping that's done in phase one, which many people feel was a little bit higher level than we typically build, or are we building it to a normal standard for the optional step for the 1.1 million?
We're following, like the project itself is following our municipal engineering standards.
Okay.
And so that's what we're applying. There's no intent. We're not in terms, I know I've heard the comments out of gold plating or whatnot, whether it's landscaping standards or not, that's not the intent. We're following our municipal engineering standards in regards to this project.
Okay, so this is just going to be like the normal standards. We're not doing anything over the top. I realize that especially if you come back with these numbers, that the intention is not to do anything beyond what's absolutely required, but that's what we're looking at. The 1.1 would be to do that just.
Right, from our perspective, that's what we want to deliver.
Okay, so as just an aside, what I realized in this conversation, when we talked about the offsite levies, is that that other option, the costs of doing the option 1 versus option 3 would be that we can only charge these offsite levies once for the project. So if we actually do it once and we have to move it over, the full cost of realignment will now fall on the taxpayer. Whereas at this point, if we do it this way for the $2 million more, we can still actually get the recovery from the offsite levies in the first time go.
That is correct.
So there is actually an additional cost to doing option 1. And I just as a total aside here, well, not total, this was very well done. So thank you for presenting these options to us so that we actually, when we have to explain to our taxpayers what we're doing, we actually can explain why we chose option A versus option C or vice versa. And so this is an awesome way to explain major projects. And so it was, thank you. And I'd love to see this type of thing when we have the other things come forward to just be brought forward up front. That way, even if it's done before the budget process, so that way when it does come to budget, we don't have as many questions. That would be amazing. Like Dean. So, no, don't think just like Dean. I just want to do a really good job. I think if somebody does a good job, you need to make sure they understand that, I recognize that. It was really well done. That's it. Thank you.
All right, Ken.
Yeah, question goes to a little bit, if you could provide me the history of that whole St. Albert Trail. So St. Albert Trail is actually a provincial highway, highway number 2. We do get funding from the province for some of our road, but do we get any funding as a major transportation and economic corridor? Do we get any funding from the province for Highway 2 that goes through our community? And can you just kind of give me a little history as to what efforts have been done around identifying that and maybe some kind of ongoing history in relation to what efforts you've done around seeing we can get some funding for the maintenance of that and recognition of that it's a major economic corridor for the province?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll apologize because I don't have all the, know if anyone from public operations, Jay Mason or John Potter may be involved, or this might be an opportunity to take an information request following this presentation. But I do know that we get a very nominal value for maintenance, being that it's a regional highway in the jurisdiction of the city. So, and all of that is associated with largely just maintenance. So in terms of a growth project or substantial capital investments to improve or widen the corridor, there's no direct funding associated with that. So, and I believe it's just based on a linear distance kilometer of a highway within a jurisdiction, maybe lane kilometers, but that we could find details. In terms of the background itself on Highway 2 going through the city, it is fully a municipal roadway in terms of operation and maintenance, aside from any support on the small funding value. When 2010, 2012, the St. Albert Trail kind of improvements started from the south end, which we saw the medians kind of landscaped, and the improvements start from the south boundary up to the north. That same principle, I know as an example, comment has been shared in the past in regards to as in the median, the stamped concrete, whatnot. That's a continuation of that improvement and whatnot. So it's just a continuation of delivering the corridor as to what has been performed in the past. We're not, expanding on anything or changing it or looking for other improvements. And then leading up to this, I mean, I don't have a full historic. I apologize for other considerations. As an example, I can use maybe aligned to this discussion is that protection of the right of way. So when we initiated the noise wall, which was under structural review and it had to be repaired and replaced, that's at the time it was, contentious for that project as well, that we shifted it and realigned it, pushed it back at the actual property level because it was actually encroaching into the right of way of St. Albert Trail. So as an example, in terms of the municipal, mitigation of risk, we pushed that noise wall back to the actual property lines and whatnot. And so again, on that south portion, there's already been some effort and emphasis and investment into protecting the St. Albert Trail right away as well.
So, I mean, basically they would say they just have responsibility for the roadway and maybe the TUC, but realistically anything else like easements, everything else would be municipality. The STIP funding would that be an opportunity for STIP funding specifically to a project? Or is that just outside the parameters of what STIP funding would cover?
But I don't fully know that. Again, we could maybe take as
a strategic transportation and what is it? Hang on. Strategic transportation infrastructure program. You can apply for funding for project to develop and maintain local transportation infrastructure. So I guess I can put it in information.
but we can investigate.
Or is that more for rural linear kind of situations?
Through to the committee, I'm in agreement with Dean. We only get the 119K from the province annually for St. Albert Trail maintenance. But that is something STIP we will look into with an information request and respond to that.
Yeah, I'm just 119K. That's news to me too. And that wouldn't even buy the sand for the road.
It's ridiculous.
Okay. Administration has used the North St. Albert Trail project as an example for the federal trade corridor commercial goods movement grant opportunity as well. So we have put in grant applications for types of improvements, Fowler Way, North St. Albert Trail, Ray Gibbon Drive.
What happens?
Unfortunately, nothing to report back.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I just curious.
Okay, go ahead.
That the Standing Committee of Whole recommend to Council that project charter ENGS 070 is approved for 16,220,000 to be funded through debt financing. Administration develop and present a council borrowing bylaw for North St. Albert Trail improvements phase 3A and 3B only.
Awesome. Thanks, Shelley. Any opening comments?
Just comments. I think everything was really, really, clarified today. Lots of good questions. And again, thank you for the detail in the presentation. So I feel confident we're going to be done with roads pretty soon.
Okay, go ahead. I just wanted to acknowledge to this council, like, we're here in part because this is a joint project in that council came back and said, "Can go back and look and see if we can save some money." And administration took that task to heart and did find the $8 million. This is not inconsequential. In that our ability to say in that budget meeting time, let's go back and look at those numbers and administration come back and see what other options can be done. Did save both the developers and our taxpayers dollars in the end of the day. And it was because of the work that you guys, the administration put through and really evaluated and critically thought about every component of this project. So just wanted to acknowledge that what we did, this is not just in isolation, and I appreciate everything you guys put forward and what you put forward for the three options and giving it to us and having it clearly laid out. I really appreciate the amount of detail and thought that went into this. So that we can come forward and make the decision that we're confident is the best that we can do and also the best price that we can do at this time. So this will make a difference in the long term. There's so many different options. So thank you for that. That's it. Mike?
Yeah, I won't be voting to support this. I think one of the alternative motions that was proposed in the agenda package that this could be deferred till later would have been a better option. We have to be careful about taking on too much debt and the impact to taxpayers, even though a large portion of this is offsite leviable. I heard there were workarounds for the fire hall in terms of alternative traffic routing or that are evaluated for any construction project. They could run the fire trucks along Fowler Way and down behind Aaron Ridge. So there are solutions there for the fire hall. We would have better actual data from the developers on their growth plans of how many houses would be built over what period of time. Again, it sounds like we have a 6 to 8 year window, and that was agreed to. The sanitary storm trunk line that needs to be built is kind of holding up the build out of the Landrex property. That would be a key priority. And it just seems that we could defer this without any impact. We don't have the real growth numbers of traffic. Really saving our money and our taxpayers and our workload prioritization for some of those higher priority projects. Again, I would say our Lakeview Business District is a higher priority. And if we ask residents trying to find money for an amenities site and a pool, people have been talking about a pool for an additional pool for 20 years. And yet we're going to simply build a road where one already exists. Yes, it may improve a little bit of traffic flow, but that's yet to be seen. And leaving reducing the budget by leaving the side of it still at a rural standard, all that says to me is 5 years from now, we're going to be back doing that construction to upgrade it and put the lights in and put the sewers in. I don't think the Landrex East Village development is going to be real happy having open ditches left along that side of the road for very long. So I think in long-term view, there are other priorities that I would see as being more important for taxpayer dollars and as well as off-site leviable work. So I'm not in favor of this particular project at this time. And I would look at the recommendation of an alternative that council could easily give to administration 2-3 year delay. And we could identify the triggers or timing of when this would come back to the table. I think I've kind of laid out some of them around response times for fire hall, actual traffic counts, prioritization with other projects, et cetera, et cetera. All those things that council could do if we really wanted to. And that would be my preferred option, but I guess we have it on the floor for a vote.
Councilor McKay?
Yeah. I'm going to use your exact arguments in reverse. I mean, I think we have all the data now. I mean, this project has been run through a prioritization matrix using the standards or the criteria that are in the matrix that puts this as a significant project and a risk. I mean, we've identified that this is a strategic transportation and economic corridor. So it will feed our business parks. I mean, you can't have a business park if you can't have specific vehicles and vehicle counts to get to your business park or access. Now, that business park we were talking about that we prioritized is on the east side of the city, but in combination with Fowler and completion of Ray Gibbon, we do open that business park for more economic. We have we can use data from developers, or I can guarantee you that if we don't have the infrastructure necessary, or we don't have kind of some commitment that as a municipality, we're going to have that for our developers, they will not build. It's almost a chicken and egg argument. So, I mean, by providing the infrastructure, whether it's utilities, whether it is actually road corridors, you have an opportunity for them to maybe be able to make decisions that are being driven by other forces much larger than just having a road. For example, they need to know where they can build their next project based on the available data. They don't need to say we're going to build it 6 to 8 years, but that's depending on whether or not we have infrastructure. So, I mean, if there's some certainty and some assurances, you're going to see that you'll have better kind of responses from developers, in my opinion. So, I mean, I think for me, I think that the fire hall and potentially access to maybe transit-oriented development or another park and ride up in that area is a significant benefit to doing this work now. I see that delaying the work, even if it's only by a few years, significantly will impact costs. I just have to use a personal anecdote. I put a new roof on my house 3 years ago. At the time, I said, no, I don't need new eaves troughs. Well, I can guarantee you I need new eaves troughs now, and the cost have gone up 50% in relation to doing eaves troughs. So I'm kind of kicking myself for not actually taking on that cost a little earlier. So I can only imagine if you take it up from a corporate level, how much the cost will escalate by even delaying it a certain amount of years. And I realize that maybe potentially that there are opportunities to scale this back, but in my opinion, I think that I honestly believe that we have an opportunity to get it done well, and within, I think, a much achievable budget that doesn't really take away from the ability of us to still deal with some of our bigger priorities, like amenities site, potentially continued development of the Lakeview Business Park, which is a #1 priority, and the Northeast servicing. So honestly, I believe we can do it all, and for all of the reasons outlined in the background report. So I will be supporting this. I think it's a good project to move forward on, and I don't see it as being a hindrance to other projects.
Councilor Brother.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too will be supporting the motion. The options that are presented by administration today indicate that the difference between the cheapest option and the recommended option is $1.9 million. And the recommendation is do it all at the same time. So the cheapest option involves creating a road that when we need to actually align the road the way it should be, we have to rip up road that we're building now, and then not only incur the demolition costs of the old roadway, but then pay for the new roadway back then. And so, the 1.9 million, I think, is probably the cheapest estimate of that particular work to occur. But in any case, so that's the difference between our recommendations today. Now, if we were to cancel the program outright and save the $16 million, that's a whole different story. But that's not what's before us today. And quite honestly, roads are expensive, but they're also necessary. And so I believe that the professionals that we have on staff here have assessed the need of the roadway in light of the growth of our community and have given us a recommendation that's worthy of being supportive. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Nothing to close.
Call for the vote. That is carried with Councillor Killick opposed. Mr. Schiff, just real quick, I heard during debate, the east side of St. Albert Trail by East Village will be urban standard, will it?
Correct, yeah, just one small correct. It will be, the northbound wasn't provided in different scenarios, but it will be delivered with full urbanization and the additional traveling act modes.
That's what I thought. Thanks.
It's just north of them.
Yeah. Okay, we are now moving on to youth and the seniors committees and their review. And we have Linda Knobloch going to help us do this. Because she is interesting.
There I am.
Hi, Linda.
Hello, how is everyone today? Thank you for having us. So what you have before you today is the recommendations from Youth Advisory Council and Senior Advisory Council in terms of next steps for both of the committees. The attachments are there that outline in detail the recommendations from both advisory committees. Administration spent a few months with both committees working through what they felt they wanted to see, what they would like to see next steps, and both committees reached consensus on their recommendations. So here today, if you have any further questions, etc., we do have a representation from the Youth Advisory Committee. We have Isabella Yu is online with us, and she was part of the many meetings and recommendations before you today. We also have Shannon Pillar, who is our staff liaison with the Youth Advisory Committee. She's with us as well if you have any questions. We have Emily Nielsen, who is our staff liaison for the Seniors Advisory Council. And I'm not sure, we did have Sharon Brown from Seniors Advisory Council or Committee, pardon me, but I believe she was having some technical difficulties. I'm not sure. Emily, do you know if she was able to resolve those?
I think she's still testing out her audio. She's trying to
get on. So hopefully she will be here. I did see that she was here earlier, but I think her audio is creating her some difficulty. So she's trying to troubleshoot it. And that's all I have.
Okay. You have questions already?
If you have, if they doing a presentation or no?
Is there any? No.
No.
No, there was not a formal presentation, just the agenda report with the two attached recommendations from both advisory committees.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, just a question in relation to the Youth Advisory Committee proposed input and whether this is open to administration or to Councillor Jolly or to Ms. Yu. Number 2, you say we recommend that the City Council come to our committee with, I love the statement, fish to fry, a minimum of twice per year. So, I mean, in your advisory role and as an idea of around getting youth voices, this is open to anybody to respond. What are you proposing fish to fry means in the sense of that? Go, yeah, Natalie, you got your hand up.
If you want to ask me these questions, just jump in.
Yeah, Mayor, can I propose that Ms. Huge takes a try at that? And I can also add something as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Go ahead, Isabel.
So yeah, I was thinking that, or the rest of our committee was hoping that committee would essentially just come to us with topics that you guys have that you guys have on your table and bring it to us. That's essentially what they meant by fish to fry. We chose that phrase essentially to catch your attention, and clearly it did. That's why. But just anything that's relevant to you guys is also, I guess, relevant to the greater St. Albert community, and that's youth included. So we would like to have a little bit more input on things that council does discuss. So just have them come to us so that, or know that we're here to provide a new perspective.
So before you jump in, Natalie, so would you say things like the e-scooter bylaw or something like that? Would you, and then the timing in relation to getting that input? So, because I mean, part of what we're supposed to bring when we're sitting around the table is kind of administration brings those issues to all the committees, yours included. But I mean, I'm just trying to see are you trying to get like more, I'm sorry, I can't come up with a witty acronym to beat your fish to fry. Are you kind of thinking up a more substantive feedback then?
I think so. We have discussed things like renaming Grandin and the e-scooters, like you mentioned. We have discussed that within the committee ourselves, but we haven't been able to kind of carry over our opinions to the committee or to the St. Albert committee. So that's kind of what we would like to do, to be able to discuss that with you guys and share our input with you guys rather than just within our own group.
So would that mean physically being like coming to council and just having that input, which is opportunity any committee has? Or I know in the past, for example, Councillor Hughes has a motion that arising out of the seniors around awards. Is that opportunity something that you're thinking about, or are you actually wanting more face-to-face time with council?
I think face-to-face might be better just in terms so we can try and see eye to eye essentially. But I think the problem we found that a lot of council's meetings do run during the day, and because we are a youth committee, many of our youth are in school. For example, that's why our current chair is not here today, because she's in school. And I just happen to be in university, so I'm on summer break right now. So we do want to have more meetings, I think, with council and have more input with them. Face-to-face is definitely something we'd like to consider, but we'd have to adjust for timing just because of school commitments for other students.
Can I let Natalie?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Yeah, thank you. I'll add to that. I think, we saw this both in the seniors and youth advisory committee. There's a frustration that they just haven't been given work to do. So I think that's a big part of the push is that, that recommendation is telling council, please give us work. We are here because we want to, provide value. And in the last, I'm going to say 2 years, council really hasn't provided any work to do. And that's been a frustration. When I think back on, the last 6 years, I think the big issues that have been put on the plate of youth advisory are, they were involved a little bit in municipal development plan, the cannabis recommendations back in 2019, something like that. Those were big items, but they don't have a job a lot of the time and haven't in the last couple of years. So that's what that one was about.
Natalie, do you have any ideas on a mechanism to make that happen? I mean, you're familiar with council processes and planning our agenda, what we're talking about.
You know what, my
list is available to you and Ledge. Is there any way to kind of take the cap list, put it in front of the two committees?
I that's asking my personal opinion. So, For me, I see, administration actually doing a great job of reaching out to stakeholders as needed. And that's not always the Youth Advisory Committee. So for the naming policy, for example, yes, there was a presentation with the Youth Advisory Committee, but the more comprehensive stakeholder engagement was physically in schools. Administration went to schools to get that youth voice. And so from my perspective, that's already happening without the Youth Advisory Committee in terms of that advisory capacity. I see a lot of value in the Youth Committee kind of outside of that corner. But for me personally, I think there's easier ways, and to Councillor Mackay's point, more timely ways to get youth feedback.
I could just go one follow.
One more and then I'll go to US.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, my last one was around your 0.5 as well. It was that you'd like to see amendment around a volunteer aspect. I just need to get your perspective as to what you see that being. I'm.
Bells?
Yeah, Isabella. What did I say? I apologize. Isabella.
No, you did say my name. You're good. So yeah, I think that would just be something like for example, we've been organizing things like the intergenerational games night with youth and seniors to create those connections or mentorship programs. So that's been kind of a volunteer aspect, and the committee has been able to do that, but also take in other people, like friends from school and stuff, to expand that within the youth community within St. Albert. And that was kind of in conjunction with the Seniors Advisory Committee to kind of get the two committees to collaborate. But also other ideas that we did throw around at our last meeting were like potentially going to the food bank together as a group. And the idea behind this was because sometimes when you're just on your own, it's kind of hard to find these opportunities, or it's scary to go alone when you're just there with a whole bunch of older people or people you don't really feel connected with. We were saying that if you go to the food bank with all your friends and you're all helping put together boxes or donations and stuff like that, it's a lot more fun and it's a lot more engaged. And I think it also helps give people who do not have any volunteering experience within the community or don't have experience seeking out these opportunities, a way to find these opportunities through the Youth Advisory Committee and then participate together. So that was kind of what we were thinking about when we wrote that down.
So it'd be like coordinating, the committee would be coordinating that, or the administration would be coordinating that those opportunities to volunteer in the community or seek them out then.
Yeah. Mayor, can I jump in too?
Yeah.
I think too, the idea is them being youth volunteer ambassadors to kind of go out, and I'm gonna put Shannon on the spot a little bit. So for example, I believe Shannon organized having some of the youth committee members volunteer at the Halloween haunt. Did I get that right? Okay. So it's just an opportunity for them to be ambassadors. Like, this is something fun to do. This is something that's important in our communities. And, that has a lot more impact than, old people like me volunteering. So they're really excited. The group is really excited about doing more than just that once a month meeting, and for really it to be a lifelong kind of way of living.
Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Certainly great work on the Seniors and Youth Advisory Committee by our council colleagues and everybody that represents. My question is for administration, who put together the recommendations, specifically related to item C and D. How do you interpret the phrase to give the Youth Advisory Committee the authority to advise administration? What is authority under that? What does that mean?
So essentially, as the drafter of the motions, it basically, these committees cannot do anything that's not defined in the bylaw. So right now they're advisory committees. And so it is essentially giving them the standing to undertake those activities. That's the word authority. That's how I meant it when I wrote it.
Yeah. Authority versus opportunity. To me, authority is sort of invested in council, the authority to do things.
So I appreciate the comments. So certainly if these these recommendations pass, then we brought the bylaw amendments to council. I could word that to be the opportunity instead of the authority. But it was just to convey that as bodies established by council, they are not authorized to do anything unless it's written in the bylaw, essentially, is what I was trying to get at there.
Okay, fair enough. Given that explanation, it to me is just when you use authoritative language, there's some confusion. So that was my point. Anyway, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any more questions?
I have a couple.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure who the question would be for. I would assume Isabella. Was there any initiative within the youth group to maybe volunteer at the Children's Fest? Was there any discussion about like events of the city?
So I'm not too sure about the Children's Festival specifically. I know I did see a couple members around. I worked with the Children's Festival with the Luminarium. I'm not sure. I know a couple of you guys went through that. I saw that, but I did also see a couple other youth advisory members there. Again, I'm not too sure how that worked out just because it did run on some school days and I know some other members do work. So I'm not sure what their obligations were for that weekend, but I know that there is definitely interest in volunteering locally. We've been talking about for example, like we mentioned before, the food bank, the Reading Buddies program at the library. They also do a summer reading game over at the library, as well as the Losika Foundation thrift store is also always looking for volunteers. So we have thrown around a couple of different ideas with that, as well as I believe Shannon, she runs Youth in Action. So they have been I'll let Shannon pick it up after me if she'd like to, but I believe they help with just educating youth on things like bullying or internet safety. So that's also been another volunteer opportunity that several youth advisory members have been committing to.
Okay, so you would just like list, so to speak, of volunteering options for the group, and then you could work it within the group, like more information of what's going on in the city. Is that your intent?
I would say that's,
Sorry.
No, I'll let you go.
I was going to say, I think Ms. Yu is actually she was in exams when the Children's Festival call came out. So at the end of every meeting, we're actually already doing this. At the end of every meeting, Shannon shares volunteer opportunities in the city, different events, jack.org stuff that's happening, that Youth in Action activities. So it's to have the bylaw really reflect what's already happening in meetings and what is exciting for members.
Okay. And then the one other question is with block parties. Was there any discussion of helping out with that at all?
I do not believe we've had discussions about block parties, no.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
All right, is that it for questions? So I just have, maybe they're for you, Marta. I noticed that under the senior recommendations, E was that a new section be added that requires the committee to reevaluate its purpose and provide recommendations 25. It feels like they both should have that recommendation, like this should be mirrored. You know what I mean?
Yep. And so what I did was I took the recommended motions from the committees and as best as I could, I turned them into legislative language. And as far as I remember, the youth committee didn't make that recommendation. The seniors one did.
Okay.
So it's certainly up to committee here today to pass that recommendation to council. But that's why I didn't add it, because it wasn't, I just maintained their recommendations and tried to just craft it.
Okay. So I guess that's the question to the youth committee. The seniors has a recommendation to reevaluate their purpose in a couple of years. Would you guys see yourself wanting to have that as part of your bylaw?
Yeah, I think as times change, it's definitely something that would be valuable to have within our bylaw.
And then if I have a question about the reduction in the size of the seniors committee, did that get asked?
No, but I can address that.
Okay, you go ahead.
Yeah, so I was at the last meeting, Councilor Jelly was unavailable and I was the alternate, so I asked them specifically about that, and they said that one of the challenges is just they've yet to actually get 12 members there at a time, and then the more members you have, the more you require for quorum as well. So they said that they recommend reducing it to 9 just because it's an achievable number that they think actually can fill all those slots then, as opposed to just filling them. And in some cases, some people took the position and then didn't show up to meetings. And so they'd rather have 9 people that are committed than filling in 12 and then having people come in. So that was their thought.
I'm always like, the more the merrier, but quorum makes sense.
Yeah.
And then again, under the seniors recommendation D, it says there will be a new section that requires an annual report to council. I feel like this should be consistent with all our committees.
Yeah.
The Environmental Advisory Committee gives an annual report. Who else does? The policing committees. The Arts Committee give an annual report, yeah. And now the seniors, so. Yeah.
Just clarify.
Yeah.
There is that requirement for everybody, for all those committees to provide an annual report, and there is currently a requirement for senior advisory to provide an annual report, but this was to specifically say what the annual report needs to say, which is that this amount of issues were referred to our committee from council this past year. There's not a requirement to say like, you must include that information in your annual. So that is just to clarify what they want to have in their report.
Okay, and so again, I want to mirror what the youth, mirror some of this to the youth committee. So is there anything in the current bylaw that requires an annual report?
There is.
There is,
Yeah.
but just not the specifics.
That's right.
I think this is to actually hold council and admin accountable to whether or not we're actually saying.
Exactly, that's why I think it should go in the youth bylaw as well. So.
Yes, again, it wasn't in the YA
Right, yep.
recommendations, but yes, certainly we can add it to these, to your recommendations today.
If we do that, am I messing with language, or can we pass this today and then add that when we get to council? Okay. So we don't have to wordsmith it, and I'll give you a week to figure out the right.
Yes, we
language for that. I just want to make sure all our committees are kind of consistent. And I like the accountability. The council is sending stuff to these two different demographic committees. And I want to, after the fact, in hindsight or whatever, or try to figure out that mechanism to make sure that the right topics are going there, because we quite often just forget. So that's the only questions I had. Anything else? Does anyone want to make the motion?
I thought Natalie might want to.
Do you want to make a motion, Natalie?
Sure, as long as I can read that. That standing committee of the whole recommend to council that the following amendments be made to the Youth Advisory Committee bylaw 26, 2016 is recommended by the Youth Advisory Committee. A, that section 9 be amended to state that training for committee members regarding local governance be provided at least once per year by administration. If we could change that, that would be great. B, that subsection 19B be amended to state that council will make best efforts to refer 2 matters per calendar year to the Youth Advisory Committee for their consideration. C, that section 19 be amended to add a new subsection E1 to give the Youth Advisory Committee the authority to advise administration on city-led initiatives and programs to provide a youth perspective. D, that section 19 be amended to add a new subsection I to give the Youth Advisory Committee the authority to undertake volunteer opportunities in the city of St. Albert related to matters that impact youth in the community. E, that a new section 21 be added to require the committee to reevaluate its purpose and provide recommendations to council regarding its format and mandate during the year 2025. Do you want me to keep going?
Yep.
2, that the standing committee of the whole recommend to council that the following amendments be made to the Seniors Advisory Committee bylaw 26, 2018 is recommended by the Seniors Advisory Committee. A, that the Seniors Advisory Committee be considered an ad hoc council committee that, subject to the meeting schedule below, is only required to meet when an issue has been referred for their consideration by council. B, that the Seniors Advisory Committee be required to meet a minimum of 3 times per calendar year under the following conditions. The first meeting of the year will be held in January, during which time the chair and vice chair will be elected. The second meeting will be held no later than June 30th, and the third meeting will be held no later than November 30th. C, that section 4 be amended to change the minimum number of committee members from 8 to 6 and the maximum number of members from 12 to 9. D, that section 20.1 be amended to add a new subsection that requires the annual report to council to outline whether any issues were referred to the committee from council in the previous year. And E, that a new section 22 be added to require the committee to reevaluate its purpose and provide recommendations to council regarding its format and mandate during the year 2025.
All right, any comments or opening remarks?
First, just to thank you to the youth and seniors advisory committees. I know it's been frustrating kind of having meeting upon meeting with no work to do. I think everyone volunteers because they want to provide value, and council hasn't been providing that for them, unfortunately. I really appreciate the seniors' recommendation to make this an ad hoc committee, because it does acknowledge that, yes, this is an important voice, but maybe it's not something that is required every single month. For the youth committee recommendations, I'm particularly excited about the education component. You know, some of the most interesting discussions that we've had is introducing the committee to some of the functions of the city. So whether that's, you know, talking about governance and, you know, rules in a meeting, that kind of thing, or, you know, how excited they got about asking questions about how FOIP works within the context of a municipality, having, you know, presentations about mental health and kind of really everything that impacts the city, snow removal. That's so important to kind of instill in young people. And I love that the city can be a part of that. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Any other comments? Go ahead, Wes.
Actually, it's a question for Marta. With the passing of these motions as is, are you locked into using the word authority in the bylaw? You're not? Okay, fair enough. Good.
I see no more members of council or committee wanting to jump in. My only comment is going to be to you, Natalie, because you're the current rep on these committees. I think the rep, I'm going to lean on you, and I think the rep needs to take some shoulder some responsibility of looking at what's coming up and referring it to these committees, you and any future rep. And maybe the two of us can figure out how to make that work. Because we all know a year out what some topics are coming, and I think there's some missed opportunities that we should stop missing. You know what I mean? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, just as a thinking about all this, as we're actually having to think about it, like, I think that there's opportunities beyond just council deliberations that we could actually, both committees could take upon. So for example, we had the business forum that happened, but there was an opportunity potentially for the business department to actually have a meeting with them and say, from a youth perspective, what do you not know that would help you? So we could identify gaps, for example. And the same thing from the seniors' perspective, if they wanted to do it, something like that. Also just the social services that the social, I'm trying to get the word, needs assessment. If, as opposed to just having the survey, if we also said, we're going to go deliberately and ask you and have, and go through those type of things as a dialogue, they would give us an opportunity to get that kind of feedback. And if that was scheduled in, as opposed to just saying, we'll just do a general thing, but we will do a general thing and target these groups to get just one-on-one conversations through the group, that would be an opportunity for us to perhaps just again pick up where we may be missing, as opposed to just looking for what, because that was the challenge I had as well, was that we looked at the cap list and we're like, I don't see anything that's obvious necessarily that had to come before council. And some of the things that council would bring up, we wouldn't necessarily have the time to do it. For example, the helmet bylaw came forward, and that was kind of a spontaneous situation. But that would have been an opportunity for us to do that. But because the timelines, that wouldn't been really available to us, right? So, but the other things where we are gathering community input, we could deliberately go and choose to, if possible, every so many years, include these two groups into the conversation. So just as an idea, I know Natalie, you're the one that's there most of the time right now, but that might be a way to handle it. Because I know that from the rep position, it was very difficult to try to find those slots just off the top of our head. So that's it. And thank you guys for all your work you're doing. It's very clear that both committees want to participate. They had the opportunity to do a kill switch, and both of them said, we would like to participate, even if it's in a lesser degree than what we were anticipating in the beginning. So I think that we need to take advantage of that opportunity. Awesome.
Go ahead, Shelley.
I had one thing to mention that I thought that perhaps, I mean, most of the surveys that go out by the city are created within the city, and it might be beneficial for both these committees to contribute some ideas of what should be on those surveys in the city prior to the surveys being sent out. So it might be feedback that no one's thinking of in turn. Yeah. Thanks.
Anything to close, Councillor Jolly?
Yeah, just to kind of in response to some of the questions. So every single meeting, I take out the cap list and we do go over things, and anything that's of interest is discussed. Kind of that process. I don't have all of the details. It's not like having Anne's name is there. It's not like having Ms. Victor there explaining something about finances. So I'm giving kind of a high level overview in a way that I can. So that, there is informal feedback being given, and administration has also been fantastic at bringing issues like the naming policy. So the youth committees and the seniors committees feedback was absolutely included in the stakeholder engagement. So it just wasn't a specific kind of separate bullet, but it was there. So there are things that are happening, but I think the challenge is staff time. These are evening meetings, and kind of deciding our priorities in terms of whether this is the best way to get a particular perspective. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Right, call for the vote.
Is Isabella know anything on OSL?
This is carried unanimously. Thanks, guys. And then next on our agenda is the civic granting. Is Anna online? Ms. Royer? There she is.
Good morning. I'm just getting all set up here. So the first one up is the amendments to policy CCC23 civic granting. Administration is bringing policy CCC23 civic granting forward to SCOW as per the direction received this past March. At that time, SCOW was presented with a proposed framework related to delegation of authority for approval of grant allocations. This last piece of work will finalize policy CCC23 civic granting and will allow administration to continue preparations for September 1st when the policy comes into effect. As a brief overview, the policy amendments include a definition for each of the 3 levels of grant programs, as well as for committee of council. And the responsibilities section has been updated to incorporate the delegation of authority framework for each of council, committees of council, and the CAO. As the amendments to this policy will impact 3 current committees of council, each of the impacted bylaws have been included with the amendment identified. The amendment provides the committee of council the authority to approve funding allocations for their assigned grant programs. With the support of SCOW, the intent is to provide one omnibus motion to cover the amendments for all 3 bylaws. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That was easy. Questions? Come on, guys.
Have any questions? Oh, we talked about this a lot already.
Yeah. Who wants to make a motion then?
I can. Go for it. Well, I can, but that's up. West is beach, West Beach.
That the agenda report entitled Outside Agency Grant Funding Formulated dated, no, I'm reading the wrong one here. Sorry.
It's on the screen.
Look up West.
Okay.
Your eyes might not be that good.
Hold on here. That Standing Committee of the Whole recommend to council that the amendments to policy C-CC-23 civic granting as outlined in the red line version attached to the agenda report dated June the 13th, 2023 be approved. Secondly, that the Standing Committee of the Whole recommend to council that bylaw 13/2023 being a bylaw to amend various council committee bylaws. 3 readings. We have talked about this a fair amount, and so administration is bringing it to committee for our consideration and in alignment with the timelines that they were asked to do. And so now here's the motion to bring forward the bylaw to be passed by council.
Awesome. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I just say that this is great work because the key piece of it, number one, aligning it across all the groups, but it was actually allowing us at the committee level to make these decisions as outlined for dollar amounts in the changes and get the money into the hands of the groups that need it sooner rather than going through an additional time delay of getting it from committee to council and on council's agenda and getting it approved. This streamlines it and gets the money into the hands of the groups that need it more quickly and more efficiently from a use of council's time, I guess, and presentation. So this is anytime this is kind of like a red tape reduction policy change. So fully supportive of it. Is great initiative.
Any close us?
Nothing further.
Call for the vote. That is unanimous.
Last one.
And the last but not least is the outside agencies granting funding formula. Anna, stay online because we need you.
Hey, just a quick changeover for me here. I did just have a few more comments on this one as well too.
Okay.
This report is being presented as a response to a request by council to bring forward a revised funding formula for the outside agency grant program. In recent years, the request from community groups for funding from the outside agency grant program has exceeded the available program funds. Groups typically request the maximum amount allowed based on their eligibility. However, groups may or may not be awarded their full funding request based on factors such as oversubscription and recommendations by the Community Services Advisory Committee. The CSAC embarks on a fairly robust review of each grant application, which includes a review of their financial information, growth and demand on the organization, fundraising planning and initiatives, uptake of their programs, and overall rationale for funding assistance. Additional municipal contribution to the organization, whether it be by other civic grant programs, and that $1 a year per lease rate is also considered. Funding received 1 year is not a precedent for future funding, as each year is evaluated separately and is also dependent on the total budget available for allocations and the total dollar value of requests. Since the motion to provide this report was made, Council also passed motion CM 2306, which provides direction for administration to update city-funded per capita based programs annually based on changes to population. This direction will be applied to the overall granting envelope, which the outside agency grant is a part of. This will assist with pressures due to the increase in funding requests and the addition of new eligible applicants. As a result, we are recommending that Council accept this report as information, which in turn will not initiate any further action on this matter. However, we have provided a formula within this report, as this was the request to CM 2301. So utilizing the Alberta Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, to increase the outside agency grant program base rate on an annual basis, in addition to population growth, would provide a substantial increase to this program each year. And I have an example for you. The CPI in April of this year was 4.3%. If we multiply this into the current base per capita rate of $9, this would give us a new per capita rate for 2024 of $9.39. Using the population estimate for 2024 of 70,928, this would create an outside agency program budget of $666,000 for 2024, which is an increase of 12%. If we only considered the population increase and not the addition of CPI, this same budget in 2024 will be $638,400. While this is $27,600 less than with the CPI factored in, it is still $43,400 more than what was provided in 2023, and it is an overall increase of 7% over the 2023 outside agency budget. Administration will continue to monitor the uptake of this in all grant programs as we move forward with the centralization of the program budgets and administrative functions. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so this is just for information. We're not proposing any changes today.
Unless we do an alternative motion.
Yeah. What they're suggesting. Okay, go ahead, Sheena.
Okay, so let me get a couple things straight here. So we had motions to do this, but you're recommending you don't do it. And I'm just trying to put together again why we're recommending you don't amend the budget.
So yes, thank you for that question. So we're recommending just to receive as information because we believe that the increase through population will provide a substantial increase. And we want to be cognizant of the fact of I guess, the taxpayer dollar. I can give you what we anticipate the 2025 amount and the 2026 amount based on the projections that finance have provided with populations. So just using population, the 2024 would be for outside agency will be 638,400. 2025 would be 646,700. 2026 would be 655,000. So it's a larger jump for 2024, and that's because we were behind with those population increases. Then we get into more of a consistent increase, and it's 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 per year, depending. And again, this is back to that motion that was made, and I believe it was Councillor Hughes' motion that council did pass back in February, that we make sure per capita programs are increased annually.
Can I just add to that as well, Ms. Fryer? I just wanted to add that, really it's about tracking the usage with the demographic increase, and we would track that usage through this year. So for administration, it was more of a cautious approach to really track the usage with the demographic increase you've recently approved. We would then be able to report back in a year in the annual report we're now going to provide to council on the granting pots, and then be able to respond and see if there is an increased need moving forward. So it was just more of a cautious approach, I would say, that we would phase this in. And then if you wanted us to explore a future inflationary increase, that could be an add-on we would add in later.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, what the recommendation of taking as information is that it will increase based on population, projected population, and then amended with each census, but that the motion to increase it by inflation as well be delayed, if anything, or not passed at least this time. Is that what I'm reading correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and it's because of the dramatic increases that would come from the inflation.
Yeah.
Population. No, the population is what it is. The population will be increased because we are behind and updating the population, like as far as a lag between the time that we actually did it and the time we're doing it now. But I think that the recommendation is to not do the inflation because the inflation is substantial right now, and it would increase it. It would increase an extra $30,000 for pretty much $28,000 more just next year alone.
And I think we just want to understand your point, Councillor Hughes. We just want to understand more about what the usage is against the demographic increase before suggesting that the inflationary increase be added as well.
Okay, thank you. I just need to make sure I understood exactly what we're doing and why. So thank you. Okay.
Any other questions? Mike?
I'd like to bring forward the alternative motion.
Okay, so we're done.
We're not there yet.
Yes, and then I'll go back.
Well, given Councillor Hughes's question, I didn't have any questions then after the answer to that. And which alternative, the alternative you're looking for is 2?
Which one are you?
It reflects changes to inflation and population, I believe. I was going to ask a question for clarification to which one of the alternatives does bring back the CPI, because we have population and CPI. So my question would be, is it alternative 1? That is population and CPI? I was struggling reading the difference between alternative 1 and alternative 2.
Anna can weigh in, but I think the difference is applying it to the overall grant funding envelope or specific to the outside agency grant. Correct.
Correct. Right. So alternative 1 looks at, as you said, we would apply it because outside agency is part of a funding envelope. Yep. You have the option of applying it to the entire funding envelope, which would increase substantially. In alternative 2, then it would be only applied to the outside agency grant. So the rest of the funding envelope would be based on what it currently is, but it would be bumped up with that extra inflationary CPI with the outside agency. Option number 3 would be keep the funding envelope just based on population, but increasing the outside agency by population and CPI. But then we would have to take money from the other grant programs in order to accommodate that outside agency increase.
Okay, so it would, to be clear, my preference is to have alternative 2, which is the outside agency operating grant, because that's where we're seeing the operating costs are, as we've said, construction operating costs are going through the roof. Our maintenance costs are going through the roof. This is the same thing that agencies are seeing, whether it's food bank for their operating costs as well. So I'll say my other comments, but I believe now with that clarification, it would be option 2, which is population growth across everything, and CPI applying only to outside agency grant.
I have a question.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead with questions.
Okay, it's a question. So, Anna, I'm thinking that how much were we, I think Councillor Jelly probably remember too. How much was we oversubscribed in outside agencies last year? Was it like 60-some-thousand? Or was it, how much?
It was way more. It was like 789,000 or something.
I don't have that number in front of me, but it was closer to, 150, 200,000.
Okay, so even if we were to increase it by the 70,000-ish or whatever it would be, it would still be falling quite short of the demand that's coming in.
Yes, it would. But again, that's prior to the review by CSAC.
Right, but CSAC does recommendation based on the total amount. They never exceed the amount that's being requested.
Correct.
Given out. So the total amount that came in as asked was 150,000 more. And if the option 2 comes forward, it would still be less than what, it would still have to make tough decisions, I guess. It's not just easy. Okay, thanks.
Questions? Honestly, this would have been really helpful to see what the numbers would have been. Like I had to write down what it is on what your recommendations are. Now I need to know what they are for option 2, alternative motion 2. I know it's going to be hard to predict CPI, but we have a kind of a guess, don't we?
Yeah, 4.5, 5.
Yeah, like what are we talking in difference in budget here? Because I cannot honestly vote on this until I know what budget implications are.
Take a 5-minute
Yeah.
pause and we can do the math.
That would be great. Okay. Sorry.
No, that's good. Yeah.
This is staff.
Anna, do you just mind saying something to see if this is working?
Council increases to what we give salaried staff. So I mean, is CPI the right one to use? It may very well be, but I'd like to have that discussion. And if we don't know what those options are, we can't really debate it.
So maybe go back to Anna and Danielle. So asking the question about what is the right
Inflationary.
the CPI? And did you have that conversation? And why did you determine where you came in at?
There's the municipal price index that we.
Anna, do you want to provide an overview of where that came from?
So we did consider Edmonton CPI, Alberta CPI. We went with Alberta CPI more than anything because we've used that previously when we looked at the studio fees a number of years ago. That was the number that we referred to as far as studio fee increases. We also thought it provided more of a well-rounded dollar value or increase for St. Albert, rather looking at all of Alberta rather than just going for Edmonton itself. If there was another index, we certainly could consider using that, but that is what we had gone with.
So if I might then need to postpone it, we'll put together the chart for all the option space and then we can come up with the rationale of.
Why don't we make a motion to receive it as information? That doesn't change anything. And then when it gets to the July 4th meeting, we won't put it on consent because there'll be a chart attached that shows the different alternatives. And if there's any thoughts between now and then on the right inflationary index, either by Councillor Broadheart or finance, that would be helpful.
Just some options that we can review.
Yeah, it's just even go on.
Procedurally, Arda, what is that? If we accept this for information, how do we direct administration to come back for July 4th with those charts?
Well, it's gonna go on we've given them direction.
I would.
Not procedurally.
I'll leave it to Marta. Perhaps we just refer this. Marta, is there a better way?
Well, so if you accept it for information, it'll show up on the transmittal probably on the next meeting, unless agenda planning moves it to July 4th. Which generally those don't have anything new unless there's a motion made. But the motion could be just to refer this for further information for the July 4th council meeting, like something very simple, because we have kind of an idea, I think, generally what we're looking for.
You're not changing your overall motion of what you've asked for. It's really the administrative homework to underpin the decision.
But you don't want to accept this report for information. You want to accept this report for information and additions for July 4th, right?
Yes. When you make a motion that says, except for information, and bring to council at the July 4th council meeting with. With
more detailed information.
More detailed.
With details on financial implications of alternative 1, 2, and 3.
And
Is that okay? Like, I mean, I don't want to subterranean what's going on here.
I'm Councillor Broadhead, I'm struggling with people doing math and coming up with different numbers on the fly.
I was actually very surprised. Financial implications to this.
The spirit of the original ask was to have it indexed to inflation. So that's one of the recommendations, and I'd really like to see that.
See the chart.
In the chart and have.
And also, I don't know who's doing the motion at this point.
I am.
Make the motion.
I think that it would be helpful if we had some alternatives as well, just for how inflation is being calculated, whether it's going to be an average of the past so many years, or if there's another measure that we can use to reflect what potential could be for any inflationary adjustments. Because what you could have is you have 1 year that's like really high all of a sudden, and then that just skews everything. And
Next year you're taking money away.
Well, in point of fact, a negative inflationary year would reduce the equity.
Yeah. You like LGFF funding.
right, so it could be an average, something like that.
Yeah.
That might be an option. Yeah, so I guess we're looking for the 3 options and then also options of how we can calculate the inflationary inflation.
And other options besides CPI index?
Yeah, any other options of CPI index or how we can calculate it? and reflect it. It's a bit more consistent, I guess.
Yeah, we're an average of 5 years or something.
I mean, the other option that council could do is just say, we'll put in a flat of like, we will take a 1.5% inflationary period. As opposed to saying it has to be based on a certain year, we'll say, we'll just adjust for inflation at this
But we
assumption.
still need numbers.
But we would still need the numbers if it was, for example, 1.5%.
What does that look like?
Because I realize that we're not taking it as an actual measure of inflation, but it would still do an adjustment that we have not been doing in the past.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah.
So
Account for inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're drafting something that,
got it there.
but I definitely want to
Yeah.
have it reflect what was asked for originally, which was accounts for inflation. Because all of our outside agencies are
Yeah.
being affected hugely by inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, what is the right one?
Good. So will you make that more?
You want to make it?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep.
Like,
I propose the alternative motion, so I'd like to.
So you're changing it though, you're not doing alternative motion, right?
Well, whatever they're drafting over there. No, that's fine.
But I don't think this needs to come back to
it's
committee.
a model of wisdom over here.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
modem? A modem of wisdom or a mod?
A modicum.
A modicum. That's the word I was actually trying to find. Modicum.
I couldn't keep up with doing the math.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, we have unlimited concept.
Maybe it's an average inflation or something.
That's what I'm saying based on.
Maybe it's just a number.
Yeah.
That says accounts for inflation.
Yeah, this number would be inflationary. For it. And it doesn't have to actually be based on any one specific measure.
Yeah, exactly. That's something.
Okay, all right, so we got.
Yeah.
2, 3, 2.
Yeah, that reads good for me.
And quickly take out and alternative and alternatives.
Well, alternative recommendations and administrative recommendations. And all the options for the inflation stuff. That's what that means.
Yeah. 2.
Yeah, I think we're very clear on what's what.
Okay,
Incentives.
sounds good.
Okay,
Want to read it?
yep. That administration be directed to bring to the June 13, 2023 outside agent. Bring to the, no,
There's no 2 there.
Oh,
two.
to be directed.
June 13th. Sorry about that.
Okay, that administration be directed to bring to the June 13, 2023. That doesn't read right.
Bring to the June, we need the June there.
June 13th item.
From today's item.
July 4th council meeting. That's just the title of the item.
But, okay, it's actually, the item is the name, so bring.
Yeah.
June, blah, 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 item.
So somebody.
Just read it straight through and you'll see it works.
That administration be directed to bring the June 13, 2023 outside agency grant, grant funding
Please.
formula item to the July 4th, 2023 council meeting with detailed financial implications, including options for inflationary index and alternative and administration recommendations. Yep. All right.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's.
So you get all the financials for what
Yeah,
they're
we got it.
recommending, alternative 1, 2, and 3, plus some thoughts on what index.
Backtrack. With your weak eye.
Call to vote just before, I would love to see this go more than just 3 years out. If we can actually go 5 or longer on the chart, so we can actually see the cumulative effects, because once this goes into policy, the ball is going to start rolling down. So I'd like to see more of just the long-term effects of what this is, because it will help us figure out if we just want to do a static number, or we actually want based on something else. That's it.
Yeah.
Call for the vote.
Yes.
All right, that is unanimous. That is the end of our meeting.